Up next, we have transportation justice.
For those of us that take the bus, we know that about 15% of the bus services have been cut. 15% of the bus services have been cut over the past year or so. And so our top priority was, well, we had a tie here of restoring and improving bus service and BART, because we also had BART rep there, opposing cuts to transit. We feel that the City of Oakland can assist with opposing the cuts to all the transportation systems, and also to help AC Transit come up with creative funding ideas. We also had representatives from the disability ADA, and they brought up the issue of pedestrian access and safety, which includes bus stop access, having safe access to the buses, sidewalk quality, because sometimes there's some of us that wind up tripping on our way to the buses, traffic and public safety. These are issues that we felt that could be coordinated by the city, or between the city, AC Transit, and BART. Our third issue priority is public safety on and accessing transit. People do feel vulnerable on the buses as well as waiting at the bus stops, but this is probably a safety issue that can probably be coordinated as well. We hope the city will look at our entire list, because these are doable things here, and they actually intersect with some of the other issues that were brought up by the other discussion groups. And we have a list of actions here as well. I think for restoring services and pedestrian access and safety, which we mentioned using city power with the Alameda County, CTC, and MTC to advocate on behalf of the Oakland City needs, especially regarding these transit service cuts. We want to consider, well, I guess, again, creative funding of transit, perhaps polling the community if they would want to be taxed to help out with our bus services. And then with pedestrian access and safety,
Okay. So in terms of pedestrian access and safety, I know we're almost out of time, there's existing models for complete streets, so streets that take into account the needs of pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, as well as the disabled community and seniors when upgrading streets. Bus shelters are a real issue, we know, having a safe and clean environment to wait for your bus. And then just involving the community more, and this can take many different forms in terms of education. I wanted to speak to that as well, because I thought the education group lifted up the fact that there's a lot of efforts underway to support education. The same is true around transit. In fact, there is a group of bus riders that have started organizing themselves, and for those people who are interested, I can wait after. We're going to be actually having an event. I don't know if Jason, the organizer, is actually here still, but there's an event in a couple of weeks dealing and trying to address the cuts at AC Transit. Thanks so much.
And our final group is Youth Empowerment. We had the Youth Empowerment group, a very active and fantastic group. Thank you for everybody who showed up, participated. One of our main items is that youth empowerment is public safety. That if you fund more youth activities and youth events, you will have to fund public safety a whole lot less. So more for prevention. More prevention, less for public safety. We identified 3 major areas. One is youth funding, the other is teen centers, and the other is low graduation rates amongst Black and Latinos. Of those concern issues, we developed an action plan around youth centers and a smaller action plan around youth funding. One of the topics that was mentioned is that equitable taxation should happen to fund more youth programs, and that it should be less draconian cuts to youth funding and arts funding. And more of a equitable taxation and cuts amongst all programs and services. The other piece was around youth centers, that there should be youth centers that are multi-service, that include counseling, arts, job creation, and job training, that you should survey young people in the area about the current services they receive and their relevance, and evaluate programs that are pre-existing around best practices as defined by the community. Utilize OPR, Oakland Parks and Recs, as the coordinating body and to develop partnerships and collaboratives around pre-existing programs in the area. Identify and develop a peer-to-peer outreach body, and identify a coalition to define what youth centers are necessary and needed in neighborhoods, or in these neighborhoods, and a coalition to identify a youth center that should happen here. Other issues were truancy, lower fees for some of the rec centers, et cetera, but our main issues were the teen centers, the multi-service teen centers, funding, and low graduation rates amongst Black and Latino youth.
So what happens at the Diamond Library? Some of the ideas that you've come up with are very simple and easy things, and I'm going to have staff just do them. Some of them are much tougher, and so we need discussion on a little bit more prioritization and how we might be able to do them. So for instance, I've been working, I know we're going to have to make cuts in the senior programs even though we don't want to, but I've been working, let's say, in North Oakland, as I told the group. Children's Hospital has volunteered to help us keep the senior centers open if we have to cut a day. So those are the kinds of collaborations that we're going to have to do. And then I knew that there was a lavender group at North Oakland, but I didn't realize it was the biggest group. And we need to probably help advertise that and do more outreach. I think we could probably have one in this neighborhood too, because when I was a council member, right next door in District 4 was the largest concentration of lesbian families in the city. So we need to think outside the box. So what I'm going to do now is a short version of the budget. This is just the beginning. You've got this, please take this out. We're going to do Budget 101, a very short version. And then we're going to open up the floor to questions. On Monday, the council, and we are going to have an all-day budget hearing for those of you who live here. There will be seats for people in the community who want to observe. The senior staff and the council and I are going to be going over the first draft of where we are in the budget, what some of the options are, and I'm hoping to get a little bit more direction from them. By the end of the month, you'll get the traditional detailed budget that usually comes out in May, so it'll be a few weeks earlier so that we can have more community hearings and more discussion and, quite frankly, more problem solving around it. My husband, before I go into that, wants me to do the drawing for the young people. All right, so one of our supporters has decided that we need to have more city unity, and so we've been picking a teenager from each of the town hall meetings. She's arranged for a special after the game dinner with the players right in the middle of the A's field. So this is sort of a fun thing. You have to be over 10. We unfortunately last week drew a kid who was under 10, and now we had to do something else for him. So, okay, so I just drew this one. It looks like Angelea Lopez. Okay? So, someone needs to take this, and we probably need your address and not just your phone number and your email. So once you finish filling this up and give it to my staff so we can make sure that you get to go. All right. Today, one of the reasons I want to start on time is because I'm going to 2 peace groups. There's a peace group meeting up in Merritt, and there's a walk for peace today at Rainbow Rec, and we're going to be going through the community. So if you can join us from 3 to 6 p.m., they're starting at Rainbow Rec at 3 p.m., and I'm going to be there probably around 3:30. So please join us. Okay, the budget. Very shortly, take a look at this. I want to remind you where we've been, that we've been pretty much cutting the budget pretty steadily for at least 4 years. This will be our 5th years of cuts. Why? A couple of things. There's this thing called the recession happening, And so that has brought everything down. Less business, less travel. Most of you haven't gotten a pay increase for a long time. It has just been very, very tough out there. And so when we spend less, when we do less, there's a lot less money in the economy, and it becomes to be this sort of vicious cycle. What Oakland has in addition to that is we were very hard hit by foreclosures. We had about 3,000 foreclosures in our city. And so what does that mean to the city? Not only does it disrupt our neighborhoods, but countywide, the tax assessor said to everybody who bought a house in the last 5 years that I'm going to reduce your property tax because of the real estate crisis. Now, never in the history of written records in California have the property taxes gone down. They did last year. It was about a $27 million hit to the city. When you add to that the 3,000 homes in foreclosure, because usually when they're sold, they never come back in the same value as they originally were, that means our property taxes continue to go down. And for city governments, the property taxes are bread and butter. It's our largest source of money. And so we were already hard hit with the recession. We also had the state taking some of our money. Last year they took $41 million of our redevelopment dollars. This year they just wanted all. And plus our property, they actually were going to take and seize, like the Army base, et cetera, and sell it, right? That was in their last bill. So this has been pretty serious business, this fight between the state and local governments. So Jerry and I have sort of postponed our dinner that we've been planning to have, I think until this gets resolved so that we don't throw food at each other. It has been very, very tough, and I've been working as a representative of the Big Ten cities and on the steering committee of the League of Cities and waging the legal fight to keep the state from taking our money. In the last few years, they also took, so those of you for potholes, the city moved pretty much all of our public works outside of the main budget because under Prop 13, you can only have so big of a general fund budget, and we were increasing how much we spent on police and fire over the last 2 decades. It used to be we spent about 50% on police and fire. Today, we're spending 74%, probably after these cuts, 75% of our dollars on police and fire. And that's why we are in the midst of negotiations on a lot of issues. I'll get to that later. But we've been paying for streets by gasoline taxes and vehicle license taxes. So when the state takes our gasoline taxes, it means we have less money to fix roads. When Schwarzenegger agreed for the vehicle license tax cut, and I have to tell you, I said, no, give the money to the schools. I'll pay the extra $28 per car, or whatever it averaged out. But when we did that and we cut the funding for that, that meant that we get less money to fix roads. So we have older streets than most cities, and we're building up this huge deficit for now we're 60, 80 years behind in our repairs. So it's really, that is very, 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 very tough. Okay, so that's the history. So what happened this year? Look at the triangle. We're all waiting to see what the federal cuts were that were just announced for this year, but we still may have cuts next year. This whole close down in Washington was only about this year's budget. Would they cut Head Start? Would they cut seniors? And I've heard from the White House, just this morning when I was waking up, I was listening. I was up at 6 o'clock to go to the city this morning. I was listening to people in the White House, and what they did say is that for this year, Head Start wouldn't be cut, but it doesn't mean it won't be cut next year. And that senior programs and Medicaid were cut. And that's what we don't know the details. We're going to look at that, and it's supposed to come out over the weekend. But this triangle, should the Republicans come back, particularly for Head Start, their proposal is to phase out Head Start, and they were going to make a 20% cut. That would have been our biggest cut, and the others that they were going to eliminate several of our senior programs. So that's potentially a $7 to $8 million cut, and that's next year's budget, which is what we're talking about, next year's budget. And they're going to immediately start negotiating about next year's budget. All they did was keep the government open until June 30th.